The question is, how can we accelerate the rate of growth in the power base so that when Stephanie's young daughter is Stephanie's age or slightly older, that she's not dealing with the same inequity issues that we are. I wish I had an easy answer to that, right? I wish I had even a decent answer to that. I think that most social change, okay, and before I did applied psychology, and earlier in my doctorate, I did more sociology and social change in particular. And if you look at social change in general, most social change tends to happen on a curve that's sort of like this, okay? If you look at gay marriage, for instance, right, in the past, if you look at it in the past 5 years, it looks like it's been exploding. If you look at it in the past 30 years, it looks more like this and then, kind of an exponential peak in the last few years. And that's what we tend to find with social change, and change in general, is that it tends to have these pops up and then periods of relative latency, right, relative sort of almost just the equilibrium, okay? Though it doesn't feel like equilibrium for those of us who are not, benefiting from it. And so I think that is what that's what I think has happened in the past and what will continue to happen. And so I think that we're in a period now, and this is just my opinion, this is not a professional, I think we're actually in a period now of relative stasis, to be honest. There are changes going on. But if you look at, say, 20 years or 25 years ago, there was huge amounts of change happening. And it started to level off a little bit. And I think that during those periods of stasis, as I tell my students when we study punctuated equilibrium in organizational behavior, does anybody remember that from OB? Stephanie, do you remember that? Okay, thank you. So when we study punctuated equilibrium, we know that when you're in those periods of relative stasis, you don't despair, right? Even though sometimes it feels tempting, you continue the groundwork, right? You keep working and you keep working because you know that there's going to hit a point where there's going to be a tipping point where something is going to happen that is going to push the trend into one of these spikes. And that honestly, to me, is, and from a 30-year perspective of this, is that I have had a 30-year perspective of mostly being in the system and working within the system to enact change, both in modeling behavior, but in encouraging behavior, but in relatively small ways. And I think that there are, luckily, some people who take much bigger leadership roles, and they tend to get a lot of press, and that's great. And thank heaven there are those people, and I'm imagining that some of you are going to be those people if you aren't already. But that's not all of us, and that's okay. And in fact, one of the things that I didn't talk about today that I was that I was thinking of talking about is that in the issue of women in the workplace, there is not you're not either winning or losing, right? You're not successful or unsuccessful, okay? You are you, and you do what makes sense for you. And the best thing that we can do for any social change, including this, is to have a groundswell of consistent modeling of behavior and action, and then be ready to trade on and leverage those points of inflection where there is rapid progress. So it's not a sexy answer, but it's the best I got. Sorry.